In the fall and winter of 1838, the Missouri mobs persecuted the saints. Governor Boggs issued his extermination order, and Joseph Smith and a number of other church leaders were arrested and shipped off to Liberty Jail. They came to Liberty Jail early December of 1838 and remained there until April of 1839, just over 2 months. In my previous videos, I discussed the details of the Missouri Mormon War of 1838, up to the time of Joseph Smith entering Liberty. In this video, I will lay out the events from Liberty to Liberation. In March, Joseph Smith wrote a very long letter to the saints, from which we take sections 121, 122, and 123 of the Doctrine and Covenants. During the early months of 1839, the saints are organizing and moving to Illinois. They are fleeing the state. They form a committee to assist and get the saints out of the state. Joseph Smith's family has fled to Illinois by this time. Now, late March, I believe it's Brother Theodore Turley and Brother Markham go to the governor to request a change of venue for the trial of Joseph Smith. The governor is not in. They return and speak to Judge King, who is the circuit judge of the district. He gets very upset at them, saying that if they had just come to him, he would have released everybody except Joseph Smith, because Joseph Smith needed to be killed. And so, fearing that they would secure a change of venue before he was able to carry out this plan, he quickly has Joseph and the rest of the prisoners transferred to Daviess County on April 6th. On April 8th, they arrive in Daviess and are put in the custody of Sheriff Morgan, as well as former Sheriff Bowman, who is acting as kind of a second to the new sheriff. On the 9th, they hold the trial before the grand jury. According to Joseph Smith, Judge King, who oversees the trial, and the entire grand jury show up drunk. They don't really care. They already know the outcome of this trial. Now, it is a grand jury, so the purpose of it is to formally cite charges against the accused. The reason for this is that when Turley and Markham went to the governor, they showed the Secretary of State all the documentation available in the case, and the Secretary of State stated that it was all illegal. They were being held for 4 months without formal charges being filed. There was no formal charge. So now King is trying to get a formal charge, and so they call witnesses between the 10th and the 11th. They do allow Brother Turley to give his testimony and then threaten to kill him, and a mob chases him out at gunpoint. And then they give a true bill, a legal bill for the indictment, which they have now accused murder, treason, burglary, arson, larceny, theft, and stealing. And this is a writ against Lyman White, Alexander McRae, Caleb Baldwin, Hiram Smith, and Joseph Smith. Now, Brother Markham, he is there. He also testifies, but Joseph Smith warns him to leave as soon as dawn comes. Get out. Don't wait to talk to the judge or anybody. And so at dawn on the 12th, I believe, he flees to Far West. He leaves early enough that he makes it there safely, but he is pursued by the mob. And if he had delayed, he would have been caught and killed. Now, on the 15th, the elders of the church come back from the legislature with an order of a change of venue to Boone County, farther east. And the sheriff, with 4 guards, take Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, and the others, and transfer them to Boone County. On the 16th, as they're on their way, the sheriff and 3 of the guards intentionally get themselves drunk, and the sheriff tells Joseph Smith, I'm going to go get intoxicated and go sleep it off. You do what you think you need to. The 4th guard helps Joseph and the others saddle the horses so that they can get out, and they start their journey to Illinois. So they're not just allowed to escape, they are helped to escape by I think it was Bowman and 4 guards. And when these men get back to Daviess County, to Gallatin, to report that the prisoners have escaped, they are whipped dragged, and one says the sheriff is dragged through the town square by his hair. The mob is not happy with him. But Joseph Smith is able to get out. On the 17th, as Joseph Smith and his companions are fleeing to Illinois, Heber C. Kimball goes to the committee on moving the saints, and he tells them, and remember, he is an apostle, he has the gift of prophecy, and he comes to the committee and tells them to get out of the state as soon as possible, or they will all be killed. I think it's within 24 hours, might be like 36 hours, but by the end of the next day, they have all left. And the mob descends on Far West like an hour after they're gone. Joseph and his companions make it to Illinois on the 22nd of April. So at this time, I believe the only two left in prison are Morris Phelps, who I believe is the brother of W.W. Phelps, and Parley P. Pratt. He is the last of the apostles in captivity. Now, speaking of Elder Turley, Elder Theodore Turley, he had been baptized in 1837, so he's only been a member for about 2 years. And he moved to Far West in October of 1838 when the saints moved in mass from Kirtland to Missouri. During this whole thing, on April 5th, just before Joseph is transferred to Davies, he and the rest of the committee, because he was on the committee to move the saints, their committee meeting is interrupted by 8 men of the mob. Among these men is John Whitmer, who was once the church historian. They all confront the committee, declaring that the prophecy of July 8th is proven false, because if you recall, this is referring to section 118, in which the Lord commands the 12 apostles to meet at the temple lot in Far West on April 26th of 1839, and from there depart on their missions to the world. It is now April 5th. The saints are almost completely driven from the state. Most of the apostles are out of Missouri. These men are coming to declare that this prophecy is thus proven false. But Brother Turley, he stands up and he says, I know that this prophecy will be fulfilled. And the men all get mad at that, but he also forces John Whitmer to testify of the Book of Mormon, calling on, he says, you were a witness of the gold plates. Are you now saying it was a lie? And John Whitmer very sheepishly kind of backs up and admits that it was all true. And the men all leave in disgust. Now, on the 26th, which was 4 days after Joseph Smith reaches Illinois, the apostles gather in Far West. They have their council, their conference, from which they then depart on their missions. I believe the only one of the apostles that is not present is Parley P. Pratt, because he is still in prison. Now, of course, after all of this, we have various splinter groups try to form. There's an Isaac Russell, that he had fallen into apostasy, he had joined the mob, partly because of this prophecy. So there's no way this prophecy can be fulfilled anymore. And on the evening of the 26th, as the apostles are leaving, Elder Turley, he was with the apostles at this conference, he stops off at Isaac Russell's house and tells him, the apostles were just here. They are leaving Far West now, but the prophecy was fulfilled. And Isaac Russell is just dumbfounded. But he still holds to his apostasy. He actually writes to the saints in England, trying to set himself up as a new prophet, declaring Joseph Smith fallen, tries to set up his own church, but it doesn't work. And Joseph Smith writes to the saints in England, and shortly after this, the apostles will go on their mission to England, and all of his work is undone. And I think his attempt to set up this church lasts for maybe 2 or 3 years before it falls apart. Also, George Hinkle, the betrayer, he was the colonel in the militia who betrayed Joseph Smith to the mob. He tries to set up his own church as well. And it holds on for a little bit longer than Isaac Russell, I believe, but by 1842, 1843, it is gone. It falls apart. Now let us talk about these last 2 prisoners, Morris Phelps and Parley P. Pratt. During the interim, we have 2 more men who are thrown into prison. This is King Follett and Luman Gibbs. They also receive a change of venue from the legislature and are shipped to Boone County. On May 21st, the indictment is put against them, murder, robbery. They arrive in Columbia, Boone County on the 26th, and that is where they are in prison. At first, they're, again, thrust down into a hole in the ground, but that's the sheriff from Davies County that brought them here does that. The next day, the sheriff of Boone County brings them up into the upper floors, and they are given run of the place. As long as they stay in the jail, they can move around freely. They stay there until July 4th, so for the rest of May and all of June. On July 4th, they are visited by Orson Pratt, Morris Phelps' wife, and her brother-in-law, Elder Clark. Now, it is all set up as the diversion. They go to the judge to get writs for getting witnesses for their trial. Sister Morris sets herself up as staying with the jailer and his wife in the upper floor so that she can be near her husband. It's all set up as this great diversion because that night, July 4th, Orson Pratt and Brother Elder Clark, they go take their horses as if they are returning to Illinois with those writs from the judge. Once they're outside of town, they circle back in the woods, tie the horses up, and when the jailer serves dinner, he opens the door to serve dinner to the prisoners. The prisoners grab the jailer, pull him into the jail, and run. Now they do it so that nobody is injured. Luman Gibbs does not join them because he has turned witness against them and has basically joined the mob. The other three men run for the woods. Parley P. Pratt gets on a horse. He darts out. He does outpace his pursuers. The whole town goes out to chase after him. He outpaces his pursuers, ties off his horse, and hides in a tree. He says he's so weak he can barely hold himself in the tree. But after several hours, strengthened by the Spirit, he climbs down. His horse is gone, but so are his pursuers, and he is able to make it to Illinois. Now, Morris Phelps, he had a little bit more of an adventurous time. He outpaces his pursuers, and when they're gone, when they're no longer in sight, he then gets back on the main road so he can go as fast as possible and beelines it for Illinois. But he is overtaken by a group of 5 or 6 men in the night that are seeking the prisoners. And I just love Parley P. Pratt's description of it. The men can't see him clearly in the darkness, and so they call him, they hail him, say, "Hey stranger, are you one of them damned Mormons?" And Elder Phelps returns, "Well, damn you, I'm not a damn Mormon." The 6 men, "Oh man." And Parley P. Pratt says, when they saw that he could damn as well as the rest of them, they figured he couldn't be a Mormon. And they even say, "You swear real good. There's no way you're a damn Mormon if you can swear as good as you can." So they let him go, and he makes it to Illinois. King Follett, on the other hand, is caught and returned to prison. However, because when they realize he's not a leader of the church, Parley P. Pratt was one they really wanted because he was an apostle. King Follett, he's an elder, but when they realize that's not really a leader in the church, the mob doesn't care. They want to kill the leaders. They even congratulate King Follett on his bravery in attempting the escape. He has a good time with them, and they stay. It's a couple months later, he is released, charges dropped, and he comes to Illinois, I believe, in January of 1840. Once Parley P. Pratt comes to Illinois, that is where we kind of end the Missouri chapter of church history. By that point, all the faithful members of the church have fled to either Iowa or Illinois. Now, they originally went towards Quincy, which I believe was but a gentleman in Commerce, Illinois, sold them basically the town. And at the time, Commerce consisted of about a half a dozen buildings. Theodore Turley is the first Latter-day Saint to build a house in Commerce. Later on that year, it is renamed Nauvoo. They also begin settling across the river in Iowa and name that settlement Zarahemla. One thing to note, back in June 26th, Orson Hyde, who had left Far West with Thomas B. Marsh and had signed affidavits against the Saints, against Joseph Smith, he comes back to the Saints in Illinois and he makes his confession, and he explains that he had fallen ill and was under the care of Thomas B. Marsh and his wife. And they were so bitter against the church that they convinced him in his feverish state to join them. And he went with them and he signed his name without really knowing what the affidavit said because of his weakened condition. And as soon as he realized what he had done, he separated himself from Thomas B. Marsh and he came to seek the saints' forgiveness. Joseph Smith, the rest of the apostles, and all the saints welcome him back with open arms, and he is reinstated as an apostle. He had been excommunicated because he had signed the affidavit, but now he is reinstated. Now, after all this excitement, it's another 18 months before we get our next section in the Doctrine and Covenants. It is not until January of 1841. During these 18 months, several things will happen. First, W. Phelps returns in humility, begging forgiveness of the saints. He is again also welcomed back with open arms. However, a number of people also die. Among them are Joseph Smith Sr. and Bishop Edward Partridge, the first bishop of this dispensation. However, the mission work of the 12 in the British Isles is expanding. Now, this mission began in late summer of 1839. I can't remember exactly when they left. Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, I believe they leave in September of 1839. Deathly sick from malaria, all their family in bed, almost dead. The famous story of them laying down in the wagon to be carted off, and then stopping and holding each other up as they shouted 3 times, "Hurrah for Israel!" And they saw their wives, who both were in bed, horribly ill, come to the door to watch them leave. A very touching scene. Now, this was the tail end of the malaria epidemic that had swept through Nauvoo in the summer of 1839. The mission to England, the 12 apostles go to England. I think most of the apostles actually go to England. It's like 7 or 8 of them. By April of 1840, they have taken the mission up into Scotland. They go to Australia by July, and by October, they're on the Isle of Man. In April also, Orson Hyde is consecrated to dedicate the land of Israel for the return of the Jews. He will start on his mission in 1840, though his companion is supposed to be John E. Page, who is one of the 12, but we will see how that goes in a future video. In December of 1839, Joseph actually went out to Washington to meet with Congress and the President himself as the final appeal to the government before God could send out his wrath. The President and the Congress refused to act, and Joseph Smith states that the hand of God was now stretched out against the United States, and they would feel his wrath until it had been poured out fully. And we'll see the civil wars where you really get God is showing his wrath against the United States. But he does mention a few other things, that at this time there are plagues of insects destroying crops in the mountains. He talks about a hailstorm in, I think, South Carolina, possibly North Carolina, about hailstones 9 inches in diameter falling, destroying the crops. I think he said a number of people were killed in it. These things are becoming more common because the United States did not redress the grievances of the saints. On a final note, for about a year, Joseph Smith, with the help of one John C. Bennett, had been petitioning the state legislature of Illinois to grant a charter to the city of Nauvoo. They had been in hearings and debates and everything, and in, I believe, December of 1840, the Nauvoo Charter is approved and signed by the governor. And the charter gives a lot of power to the city. But that's where we're going to leave this. They have just gotten their city charter. The missionary work in England is growing, and the saints are now settling down, finally starting to feel secure because the charter gives them security in their lands.